In the world of manually operated actions, the manual stick shifts of the gun world, if you will, bolt action and pump action are by far the most common, but lever action offers something a little bit special. There's just something about rocking that lever forward, seeing that bolt slide backwards with zest, and feeling every click and clack of slamming a fresh round home. Sadly, airsoft lever actions have mostly been relegated to collector status, with no one really stepping up to the plate with a gameable, reliable example. Well, G&G decided to give it a go, and perhaps inspired by firearms like the Bond Arms LVRB or the Bear Creek Mall AR, figured a lever action lower with an AEG Upper might just be the way to go. And this is what they cooked up, the LevAR, Lever AR Hybrid, or LevAR, as many people, including myself, have taken to calling them. A little bit old and a little bit new, I'll admit. Looking at early press release coverage, I thought it was a bit too funky for me, a meme gun at best. But seeing it in person and really putting it through its paces, I gotta say, not only are the aesthetics kinda growing on me, but more importantly, this might be the ticket to the most gameable lever action we've seen so far. Now hear me out. Standard G&G AEG Upper with standard AEG hop-up unit means most standard accuracy upgrades, rail system swaps, and accessories are as easy as we could ask for. Standard AR pattern AEG magazines means no weird proprietary tube magazine system seen on other lever actions that just wouldn't be practical on the field. You and your buddies probably already have a pile of compatible AR magazines. Not to mention, if you already have another G&G AEG compatible upper receiver, you can easily swap to a different upper in seconds. Breathe new life into that old upper gathering dust in a closet somewhere. Two flavors of the LevAR available. You got the 15-inch standard version with skeleton stock and the compact 7-inch stockless variant. Starting with the full-length version, the overall length is a little bit longer than a typical 15-inch AR because of the longer grip area and long fixed stock versus a typical AR. I think they went with a good barrel length, and I think it suits the classic lever action carbine proportions quite well. Looking at the rail, we see a pretty standard G&G metal M-LOK rail that covers nearly the entire metal outer barrel with a small section of Picatinny up at the front. I like that there's 45-degree M-LOK slots at the top positions, although that does not continue to the bottom 45-degree sides. I like their choice of a rather clean metal muzzle brake threaded on top of a standard 14mm counterclockwise thread. The polymer skeleton stock is a fixed length with the distance between the trigger and the butt pad, called the length of pull, almost 3 inches longer than a standard AR buffer tube stock, even at its longest setting. I would definitely advise trying out this gun first if you typically like running shorter stocks. The stock does feel exceptionally well made and solid for a polymer stock and has a comfortable rubber butt pad on the end. 2 thumb screws allow you to pick 3 different height settings for cheek rise. On the other side is a shell holder with 6 plastic dummy 5.56 shells. I think it's a pretty cool touch that adds to the overall lever gun look, and I'm glad is removable if you're not a fan. And then of course there's the 7-inch stockless variant. Identical mechanisms inside, the main difference is the stock delete and the shorter M-LOK rail and barrel for a savings of about $25. As well, the muzzle brake is swapped to a much chunkier one for sort of a sawed-off shotgun look. It's just fun to even hold a gun like this, and it's hard not reliving your short lever action fantasies, whether it's akimbo 1887s in Modern Warfare or flipping one on the back of a Harley like the Terminator. Both variants have the same flip-up iron sights with fiber optics while folded down. Normally a bit hard to get low enough on most ARs, but even with the full stock, the fiber optic sights line up really nice, and of course, it's not an issue without the stock. The upper receiver is standard G&G AEG Upper, but the lower is certainly a little bit different. But the more I look at it, the more it doesn't look all that bad or even out of place. What do you guys think? There's a little plastic piece covering where the charging handle hole would normally be. It's a little odd with the areas you can tell the charging handle interfaces with, but at a quick glance, it blends in just fine. Texture on the body is typical for what you'd expect on a G&G metal body, that is to say a nice smooth semi-matte finish and good color matching throughout. There's a relatively small LevAR name on the lower. I'm glad they stayed away from large flashy markings on a gun like this. There's a unique inset cut onto that lower not seen on a standard AR lower that I think actually meshes quite well with the extended line on that magwell. While that extended magwell looks a little bit weird at first, when racking that lever, especially without a stock, it feels more natural for your offhand to be much further back to balance the gun a little bit better. The extended magwell combined with the magazine baseplate offers a pretty comfortable spot for your offhand to support the gun. The mag release on the left side is a standard ambi release and works quite well. On the other side is a super extended release using 2 levers to reach where the normal release would be on an AR. They took the lever theme quite seriously. It works surprisingly well considering how long it is, but there is one issue. At least for me, the paddle is a little too low and large, and I found my hand bumping the mag release multiple times during testing. If it were mine, I'd remove the system entirely, as the left side ambi release works just fine for me. Looking at the magazine itself, it's a polymer low cap magazine that holds just 32 rounds. But of course, being such a slow rate of fire, a couple of these would be fine for most games. It uses G&G's usual extended follower, which allows every BB to be shot, whereas typically a few will fall out of an AEG. Just be careful to click it back in when inserting an empty magazine. It's a cool mag, and I appreciate G&G going through the effort of making an entirely new magazine body versus reusing a standard magazine, which they easily could have done. It's compatible with most AEG AR magazines on the market, like this PTS mag for instance, and of course you can do silly things like this drum magazine as well. Compared to a standard AR pistol grip, the LevAR grip is pushed quite a bit further backwards, and the angle is leaned quite a bit forwards into more of a classic rifle grip. There's a bit of checkering and a rather unique pattern that actually works quite well at being grippy without being abrasive. Controls like hammer and trigger are easy to reach, but the angle of the trigger seems to disagree with the grip angle a little, almost like it wants to be pulled down rather than backwards, but it still works fine as intended. Green gas for both versions is filled into the grip area by flipping the entire gun upside down. Taking a closer look at the actual lever action, I really like how the bolt looks moving backwards and cocking that hammer. Being fully metal, the mechanism also sounds fantastic as well. Clearly, G&G paid attention to the tactile feedback of this gun, and the results really show. The lever loop is quite large and gives a generous room for your fingers. It's a metal piece, and the edges aren't too sharp, though regular users might opt for a quick paracord wrap around that outside loop. Breaking open the action is really light and smooth and can be done just by extending the fingers. There is a little bit of play in the lever due to a slightly loose pivot area, likely intended to be a little bit looser for a nice smooth action. Even real lever action rifles often have a little bit of play in that lever. I'm sure installing small metal shims inside would be a quick fix if need be. There is quite a bit going on when you rack the lever, so let's take a look at the stages. As you open the lever, the bolt moves back, pushing the hammer backwards. The dust cover is opened if it was closed, and then you hit a little bit of resistance. Then the internal nozzle, which looks kind of like a dummy shell, is pulled backwards, allowing a BB up into the hop-up unit. As you return the lever backwards, the nozzle pushes a BB forwards into the chamber, and then there are 3 distinct clicks. The first 2 being the hammer and trigger resetting, and then finally, just as it closes, there is a final click for the lever's safety to disengage. The last click is so the gun knows the lever is closed and ready to fire. Because of the slight play in the lever, it's possible to accidentally force the lever a little bit too far and actually miss that final click, preventing the gun from firing. It didn't happen very often, and generally it was just fine, but worth mentioning as a potential failure point. The safety is a bit different than normal and is actually reversed, with fire being up and safe being down, but the action is nice and smooth and clicks nicely into place. There is no ambi safety on the other side. It's possible to rack a round into the chamber, decock the gun, then put it onto safe. When ready to shoot, simply flick off the safe, cock the hammer, and a shot is ready to go. Obviously, don't walk around a safe zone with a round in the chamber, but for certain instances, it's fun to have more options. The lever, hammer, and trigger remain functional with the safety on, but the hammer is blocked from actually firing. Worth mentioning that with the safety off and hammer down, hitting the hammer will fire off a shot, so bear that in mind. It would be pretty fun to get a kill this way though. Taking a look at the trigger pull, there's about 3 millimeters of take-up that doesn't spring back when you release. There isn't a distinct wall, but rather a light and smooth drop of the hammer. There is quite a bit of over travel after the shot. Pulling back on the hammer like this will not reset the trigger. The gun can be fired by slingshotting the hammer forwards. Overall, it's a very light trigger action that is perfectly adequate for the job, but I would certainly appreciate a bit of a more distinct break and a little bit less over travel to make this a much better trigger. Field stripping the gun now, taking off the upper is quick and easy. With the magazine out, just pop out the front receiver pin, then gently slide off the upper, being careful to manage the barrel. Of course, this doesn't get you too far into the actual internals, but it's a quick way to swap uppers and take a cursory look at the internals. In the lower, we can see what sort of looks like the shell of a mech box made of the same type of metal. Racking back the lever, you can see it is of course very different to an AEG. We can see the unique brass nozzle, which looks sort of like a dummy shell, and hopefully G&G will release different power levels so you can swap them out. We can see that the lever arm itself has a single arm on the left side that slides that metal bolt backwards. It looks to be a pretty strong design, but time will tell. Running the lever through its entire travel, it's actually buttery smooth the whole way and does not have that higher resistance area that we saw before. I discovered it's actually the dust cover release mechanism that rubs on the inside of the upper receiver. Not sure if it's a quality control issue or a design issue, but it looks like the whole piece can be removed with a couple screws if you wish. Closing up the gun is as simple as taking it apart, just make sure to be gentle and don't force anything. A few test racks always just feel right after putting a gun back together. Onto the range now. Magazine loads like any mid-cap magazine, just with a lot less capacity. Green gas fills through the grip, and like any non-blowback, gas efficiency is excellent. Popping in a magazine and racking the lever just feels so good. They really did a good job with how it sounds and feels to operate. Sure, you miss out on the kick because it's non-blowback, but just going through the motions of a lever action just feels proper fun. Accuracy is excellent. I had no problems hitting these smaller targets, very consistently hitting exactly where I pointed, and any misses felt more like me than the gun. Of course, this is a relatively short range, but we've still seen many guns show their inconsistencies on this shorter range. It does take a little getting used to exactly how this gun handles, but once you get into the groove, it's quite possible to get a decent rate of fire, definitely quicker than a bolt action at any rate. Now, it is much easier to shoot quickly if you're braced up against cover. Running the shorter 7-inch variant is definitely a bit more of a handful, requiring you to balance the entire gun against the force of the lever without bracing with a stock. It's also naturally a bit harder to shoot small targets consistently. Still though, the short version offers that fun factor with a bit more meme value, but if it were me, I'd definitely still go with the longer version, with the stock being a major factor. Overall, I think the LevAR or LevAR or LevAR is a win from G&G. Super satisfying action, decent parts compatibility, and perhaps most importantly, it's priced right at just a bit higher than a typical mid-tier AEG. I'm sure it's not just me, but a lot of us have been waiting for a good lever action option, and this one might just fit the bill. Definitely try to come by and see one for yourself. I hope you found this video useful. As always, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you like clicking subscribe buttons, and I'll catch you on the next one.